Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Rethinking the Sound in Classroom. My name is Konstantinos Andronikidis, and I work for European SchoolNet, together with my colleague Sonia, who will be moderating on the back end your questions, your thoughts, and making sure that everything is working fine. So before we start introducing our speakers, and for those that do not know us, European SchoolNet is a network of 33 ministries of education that aims to support educational stakeholders in the transformation of education across Europe and beyond. Today's webinar is organized by the Future Classroom Lab in collaboration with Ecophon and the Novigado project. And again, for those that do not know us, the Future Classroom Lab is an inspirational learning environment that is located in Brussels. And as a place, it challenges visitors to rethink the role of pedagogy, technology, and design in their classrooms. As you can see, I am in this space today, and I'm welcoming you from here in Brussels. Ecophon, on the other hand, is a global supplier of acoustic systems that contribute to good room acoustics and healthy indoor environment. And they are one of our industry partners, of Future Classroom Lab's industry partners. And we are very happy to be joined tonight by two of their experts, Douglas and Bianca, who will be our speakers. Our experts will tackle the issue of the power of sound in the modern classroom and the great effect over the teachers and the learners' health, well-being, and behavior. And there will be different examples shared. And we aim to strive a discussion with you and with them after their presentations. So we urge you to use the chat functionality or the Q&A functionality from wherever you are watching us and share your comments, your concerns, your questions, or even your experience from your own classrooms and how you've experienced sound in your environments. So for now, I will give the floor to our first speaker, Douglas, to start with the presentation. So I welcome Douglas here with us, and I give you the floor.
Thanks very much, Konstantinos. So yes, Bianca and I are concept developers at Ecophon. So we work together with a fantastic international team to increase the awareness of sound and acoustics globally. So we do this by talking with people who are directly involved in education and also building management. But we also talk to architects, acoustic consultants, ministries, and scientists, for example. So today we're going to talk about sound in schools, which is an extremely important and neglected subject. And I'm sure that those of you that are involved in education directly know that quite well. So why do we need to talk about acoustics in schools? Well, let's take a look right here. This is a school currently at use in the UK, and it's from the Victorian era. That's the 1800s. And this school was built to last. That's why there are more than 3,000 of these schools in the UK currently in use. And this isn't just an issue of the UK. If we look a bit closer to home, where I am, for example, in Sweden, this is a school I walk past every day on the way to work. And it's a beautiful building, but it's an ancient building. And if you look carefully on the facade, you can actually see it says 1889. So what's the issue here? Why isn't this a perfectly good place to teach and to learn? Well, this is really what these kinds of schools were designed for. This is a time when going to school was more like going to church, and children would sit politely listening in pews, essentially. And if they made a peep or a sound of any kind, they were probably going to be punished with that stick right there that the teacher's holding. And in those days, the motto was that children should be seen but not heard. And unfortunately, this is just, now we know this is not the way to teach. It's not the way to learn. It's just not an effective way. So today we have something quite a lot different in schools. So this is more the school of today, the classroom of today. We have almost the opposite motto. Children are really encouraged to be heard and to communicate with the teacher and also with each other. And we do this because we really want children to learn 21st century skills in the classroom. And here you can see the 4 C's of 21st century skills: critical thinking, creativity, collaboration. And what really underlines all of these skills is the 4th one, and that's communication. So communication is really central. And because of changes in pedagogy that we're looking at now, teachers have to make a much more dynamic use of the space. I mean, sometimes children are still listening and sitting in these traditional classroom settings, but sometimes they're also working in groups. Sometimes they're on their iPads, sometimes they're doing their homework in class. And these rooms really need to be flexible. They need to be integrated with technology, and they need to accommodate a really wide range of activities, often at the same time. So these schools are really an example of what we don't want. You can't really apply modern teaching methods in an environment like this successfully. You can just imagine what the sound environment is like in a classroom like this, where you have wooden floors with scraping chairs sounds and feet stamping. This is not an environment for modern students. So what happens if you try and apply these techniques in that sort of environment? Well, you get unbearable noise. I just want to play this because I want to just show you an example of the challenge we're facing, and these the image has been altered in order to for anonymity. So. In any case, you get the idea. And this is an example that was taken from YouTube, and it's quite amusing that one of the students said that, seriously, this isn't noisy compared to my class. But it's a funny comment, but it's a really serious issue. We're seeing classrooms like this every day, and they're really intolerable. So why is this a serious issue? I mean, why do we need to really worry about classroom noise? I mean, children love to make noise, so we can assume they must be thriving in it, right? Well, we need to think about why we send children to school. I mean, why don't we just keep them at home? And really the reason is communication. We send them to school to communicate with each other and to communicate with the teacher. And communication is about talking, of course, but this is really useless without being heard. So communication is fundamentally about listening. And when there's noise, as you can hear, talking, hearing, and listening just doesn't work. If you try and hear what I'm saying when I'm increasing the noise level, you can hear the higher the level, the more my speech is being mocked. And this really affects hearing at all levels, from the ear to the brain. And it's distracting, and it's annoying, and you cannot hear yourself think. And you definitely can't communicate effectively. Communication fails. So we also really need to think about, who is this affecting? I mean, these are children, and they're not resilient at all to noise. We know that children's brain's ability to cope with sounds matures as they get older. As their cognitive abilities improve and mature, they also are able to deal better with the sound environment. So you're adding all sorts of conditions to their maturing brain, which are distracting. You're adding stress, there's fatigue, possibly there's a hearing or a language impairment. And now you're looking at lower grades, lower life achievement. And children are really not enjoying this situation at all. We recently did a survey in France, and we wanted to know if children, how they perceived and felt about the sound environment at school. And we collected a huge amount of data from a lot of schools. And we did this survey so that the media would really have to take notice of what we know is a really bad situation globally, but specifically in France as well. And what we found with this survey was that 9 out of 10 students consider their school to be too noisy. This is a huge majority. We also found that 3 out of 4 have difficulty concentrating in class because of the noise. And if you can't concentrate in class, are you really learning anything? And we were also finding that 3 out of 4 cannot hear the teacher's voice clearly. They're not able to hear the main person that they're supposed to be attending to in the classroom. So these are really bad findings, and the media actually really did take notice of this in France, and there were 120 articles actually about this in the French press at the time. And this is a great, important step for France, because you can really only solve an issue once you know what it is, and now they know. And France is just one country, but let's look at the rest of the world. Well, PISA asked kind of similar questions to this before COVID happened in 2018. They asked questions about the sound environment in classrooms all throughout all the OECD countries, and they found that a very large amount of them were having real problems. France, in this case, was the third worst performing on these questions about the classroom environment, unsurprisingly, if you look at our data. And the results are really showing that the environment was really affecting other skills, really important skills. When they're finding correlations between how badly the children rated the sound environment in their school and how badly they were reading. So this is really not something to ignore, because now you have reading and listening both affected, and these are really the foundation of learning in a lot of cases. So now we've got COVID happening, and this is adding the effects of COVID on education. You have UNESCO estimating a 10% global drop in reading proficiency due to school closures specifically. And remember, this is an average. So it's only the richer countries that really went online and had that education online that managed to perhaps make up some of this deficit. And it really depended a lot on home support. And parents send their kids to school for a reason. I mean, they don't have time to be teachers as well as earn a living. So now we're looking at sending children back after COVID, back into these noisy classrooms that PISA has been warning us about in 2018, and saying that they were already looking at a reading deficit due to noise. So the question is, are they really going to be able to make up this now COVID-related 10% deficit under these conditions? So it's really important to also remember that children are not the only ones in the classroom. The teachers also really need a good sound environment in order to hear the children speak and to do their jobs properly. And let's not forget that some teachers are also noise sensitive, or they belong to special or additional listening need groups. Perhaps they're even hearing impaired. So many teachers have voice problems as a result of the noise in the classrooms from shouting all day. And they're not just shouting for the fun of it, of course. They have to shout or they're just not going to be heard. So we did a survey on teachers in India, and we looked to see whether teachers have, we know that they have bad conditions all over the world, but we wanted to know specifically there whether or not noise was a major stressor in their lives. And we found that 9 out of 10 said it was. But this survey also showed that 6 out of 10 teachers claim that they have to repeat themselves over and over again in class due to noise. So their communication with the students is really affected. And we also asked whether or not noise was affecting their classroom participation, and 9 out of 10 said yes. And we suspected this already, but now we have evidence for it that we can then take and look in other countries. And it's really important to build up this evidence basis, because otherwise the world forgets and they assume everything's better now. But anyway, this is just evidence from one country, and we look to see if there's anything else supporting this. And of course, we're finding in Europe as well, there's research surveying teachers as well, and 80% claim noise to be a major stressor And we're also looking at heart rate increases in relation to the noise in the classroom. So teachers are under a lot of vocal and emotional stress, and this is really a health risk for them. This is why teachers are often cited to take more sick leave than other professions. And Victorian schools are not the only ones around, fortunately. We have new schools built every day, like the beautiful school built shown here. But here we have a second problem, is that we need to know, how are these schools actually being built? What's the acoustics like in them? And we know that architects that we speak to, acoustics really isn't on the map for them. It's really not part of their training. And they also don't really know anything about pedagogy. They don't think about communication in the classroom. They don't think about things like teaching styles or children with special needs. So most often their focus is really on the way a building looks and really not how it sounds. So what's to stop architects from building more really terrible classrooms? And there are really only two things. The first thing is actually you. Teachers, other stakeholders, but also probably have fulfilling the dual role of being parents as well. This teacher and parent advocacy is really essential to what we need to achieve. Teachers need to raise awareness about what's happening in these environments so that things can change a little bit faster. And they also really need to support academic research in those classrooms so that we can really objectively evaluate the effects that these things are having on them. The other thing that is standing in the way of architects building more poor buildings is standards. Swedish and English standards are depicted here, and these really tell architects how they should shape the sound environment inside. Sometimes they're just recommendations, but sometimes they're actually also legal requirements in some countries. And to be honest, some countries don't have any at all. And we have key people in our organization who work continually with developing and revising these standards. So they sit on committees that shape the way these standards are. And it's really not an easy job. You know, they have to fight for even the most basic standards to be applied in classrooms in a lot of places. And the battles that they fight actually don't stay won. Sometimes things regress. But there's something else to consider, is that these standards are usually based on averages. Children are not all the same. They're not having the same shape. They're not all having the same size. They're not all having the same level of ability. And their senses function differently. So the question is, who are these standards really designed for in the first place? So I bring you the average child, the average student. And if you think of in terms of averages, the average student doesn't have sensory difficulties like hearing loss. They don't have a language or a neurological challenge that they're facing every day, making hearing a struggle. And they probably aren't learning in their second language or third language or fourth language. So if you think in terms of averages, these children are really just outliers. They're irrelevant. So their percentage isn't considered high enough to be considered worthy of having a proper education, being considered. So what happens to this child here when the classroom design doesn't accommodate them, doesn't consider, and just thinks about the average? Well, they have noise overwhelming their remaining senses. They can't hear what the teacher is saying. They can't hear what the students are saying. And learning anything at all becomes a real effort that in some cases they really can't overcome. And in the last decades, inclusivity has really become a big topic. It's used a lot in education. Many schools really want to be inclusive. And what this means is that they put children from additional listening needs categories into the typical classroom, and this is called mainstreaming. But the truth is that most schools really aren't ready for mainstreaming. You can take this example. In September, we were contacted by a teacher at a school in Sweden, and they asked us for our help because they had a real problem with acoustics in the school, but they also have quite a difficult student group. And these children have additional listening needs. So this school has a problem with their acoustics, but they also have a very specific learner group that's also a challenge. So how did they solve these challenges? Well, in this school, their solution was actually to de-integrate. They took the children out of mainstream classes and they put them into a special class. And this is because children with special listening needs can't handle high noise levels. It really upsets and distracts them and basically makes them impossible to teach. So instead, the school was forced to isolate them in this situation. So what's the practical solution here is to, well, if you think about the kind of environment that we would prefer to have if we, for learning, if we didn't have snow and rain and all these terrible things that make the outdoors quite uncomfortable for a large percentage of the year, especially in Sweden where I live. Well, we'd like to take this principle of the outdoors and bring it indoors. The fact of the matter is that our auditory system has really evolved in this outdoor environment. And now we spend 95% of our time in boxes like this with hard reflective surfaces. And when you speak, the sound comes back at you from the walls and the ceiling. And this is, this really, those reflections build up in the space and they take a really long time to go away. And this is how noise builds up. So if you put sound absorbers on the ceilings and the walls, you can really recreate that outdoor condition indoors. And sound won't be able to bounce back and accumulate. And if we improve the acoustics like this, we'll have a much better possibility to integrate. We can't fix every problem, but we can really incorporate more children from the spectrum of difference on fairer terms if we do it like this. So before I hand over to Bianca, I just want to say, I want you to think about imagining a doorway like this for a second. And what if you built this for an average? I mean, the average male is 170 something centimeters tall, but that's a little bit sexist. So let's design it for the average female. Or we take something about in the middle, but it really depends on how you're going to define this average, because we wouldn't want to be ageist either. So we could take the average across the entire age range in this case. But as you can see, this would not be a very practical solution. And it really shows that doorways are not designed for an average person. They're designed to incorporate people from a whole spectrum of differences. So my final message is this, which is that we really need to start building classrooms the same way we build doorways. A good classroom shouldn't be evaluated on how well it accommodates the average child. It should be thought of as how well it accommodates every child in the classroom. So thank you very much, and I'm going to pass on to Bianca now.
Thank you very much, Douglas, for this very, very interesting presentation. And I think there is this very nice discussion in the chat already, sharing their experiences, people. And now I'm welcoming also Bianca. And yeah, the floor is yours, Bianca, to continue with the presentation. Just to let you know that you're muted. Maybe unmute your microphone.
Yes, thank you, Konstantinos, and thank you, Douglas, for the introduction. So yes, I'm gonna move on from kind of where Douglas left. We are used to design for our eyes. We want to see a beautiful and modern building because we think that new and modern is always good. But in reality, we see a lot of examples where we could do better. So we need to design for our senses. And here we see a picture of a beautiful tropical surrounding. And when you see this, you would probably not think that this is a school, but it is. It is the Green School in Bali. And actually, I am quite jealous of all those kids that go to school here and that I cannot send my own kids to school here. The Green School in Bali. So daylight, yes, full of daylight, fresh air, comfortable sound, and it probably smells good too. So why don't we take this example and learn from this? Like Douglas said, we should copy the outside and take that in. Next slide, please. So designing for the senses, it is pretty normal to be around 90 to 95% of our time indoor. And when we realize that the natural outdoor environment is still the most healthy and comfortable environment for us people, why don't we design our buildings with this in mind? Next slide, please. Everybody is unique. Some people are introvert, others are extrovert. Some people have a visual or a hearing impairment. Some people really enjoy theoretical tasks. Others may be more practical, or maybe even love being creative. We have to design spaces for each and every one of these people. Next slide, please. So we at Ecophon, we are taking acoustic design to activity-based design with all the senses in mind. So let's take a good look at the activity that will be done in the space. Will you make sounds in the space, or will you even make noise? Will you need to concentrate or communicate? And will you be alone or in a group? And who are the people using the space? Are these young kids, or maybe old people, or maybe it is a mix? Are there sensitive listeners in this group? And how many people will be in this space using it daily? And finally, what does the space itself look like? Is it square? Is it round? Where is it in the building? Is it small? Is it big? What are the spaces nearby or next to it? And what are the materials used on the floor, on the ceiling, on the furniture? Next slide, please. So I would like to show you some examples. Here we see a church. This church was built in 1903. And last year, they transformed the space suitable for a school. Quite a challenge. In a church, you would like some amount of reverberation, but in a school, the same amount would be very disturbing. So they have built in some blocks for the classrooms, and they have kept the open space with these beautiful windows as a canteen. To bring down the reverberation time, they used acoustic islands in a specific pattern. It's not quiet here, but maybe that's okay in a canteen. For a classroom, it's not so good. We want to communicate in the classroom. We want to concentrate in the classroom. So in the smaller spaces they have created, they have added acoustic ceiling and also acoustic wall panels. And with this in mind, the communication is very good. Everybody can hear each other, and everybody can listen very carefully to everything the teacher is saying. Next slide, please. So I want to show you another canteen. This is also a canteen. But in this canteen, the school is specifically designed for kids with autism. So I would like to show you this clip. And in this clip, you can hear the difference in sound from before and after adding absorbing materials. Please, can you? So you can imagine that people who are more sensitive to sound will be very comfortable here after the added absorption. But when they would be in the canteen in the church, they would not be so very comfortable. Next slide, please. So kind of a trend here in the Netherlands is that we have a big entrance in the school with this huge staircase. But we need to think about other uses as well. Do we use this only as an entrance, or do we want to use the space for education or education as well? Or maybe we want to play games in this space, Or will we do movement on the stairs? Or maybe there's a podium in front of the staircase and kids will perform here and kids will sit on the stairs. We need to think about all these activities. If it's only an entrance, we need to think about that. But when it's have another activity there, you need to think about the additional spaces as well. The sound will travel to the adjoining rooms as well. And then the classrooms here. Do we have traditional classrooms or more open spaces? A traditional setting where a teacher is in front of the class and everybody is facing the teacher? Or is it more open? And are the kids working in groups? And when they do, are they not disturbing anyone else? Is there still space for a child to do some concentration work? Or maybe a cozy place where they can snuggle into and read a book? Next slide, please. The school we see here uses movement as a big part of their education. So not only as part of the lessons, but the spaces are designed to challenge you to move. They stimulate movement. What we see on the right picture is what they call the ninja cage, and the kids can swing in the ropes, climb the walls. There's also a climbing wall next to the staircase. And in the hallways, they've added tracks on the floors so kids can run around instead of just walking quietly down the hall. A challenge, of course, for the classrooms next to it, because the classrooms are directly joined to these open spaces. In the classrooms, it's very quiet. Kids can concentrate here, and they are able to listen very carefully to the explanation of the teachers. Next slide, please. So finally, I would like to show you 2 short clips. We see here my colleague Ludo van Sprang, and he is at the sports hall at Van Swiete Lyceum in Amsterdam. This sports hall was built in 2014, so it's not that old. But when it was put to use, there were many complaints about the sound. So let's hear it. Now the second one, please. So I think these clips speak for themselves. There was already an acoustic ceiling in place, but it's not always about the measurements that we start with. It's also about the experience. It's more about the experience. We want to feel right in the environment and doing the activity that the rooms are designed for. So let's create healthy buildings that also sound good. Next slide, please. I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I welcome back Douglas and Konstantinos.
Thank you very much, Bianca, for the presentation and for all the examples that you gave us. It's really very, very interesting, I think, to hear the differences in the videos as well, but also to see all this research conducted and how much has sound affected learning in the classroom. We have some comments from our followers, so the people that are participating, who are of course mostly teachers. And we see, for example, a comment from Chad, who is from the Texas Women University FCL, who are members of the Innovative Learning Labs network, and they are catering for deaf or hard of hearing students, and they're saying that even with carpeted noise ambient, noise is very problematic for them. And of course, this is something that especially students with some disabilities or special needs are more prone to. So I was wondering, do you have any examples of how this can be solved, or in your kind of experience, how have you dealt with similar situations?
Bianca, would you like to take this one? Or
Sure. What we do because now we are talking about an already existing building, and that is what we see quite often, that when we create a new building, we can take it already into account, even though this is sometimes still forgotten and not being done. But when we have already an existing building and there are still complaints about the noise, you should probably get someone to come by and take measurements or even experience the sound for themselves. And because it's very difficult to give an advice from a distance, if I get a complaint in a school, I always make an appointment to see for myself and to hear for myself. And I think maybe even more feel for myself, because even though we cannot see sound, we can hear it, but it's also a feeling that you get when the sound is good in a specific environment. It feels right. And you need to experience that for yourself before you can give any advice. So, yes, I think you should get someone who is specialized in this and experience it, and maybe do a measurement, and then probably some changes will needs to be done.
I can also make a comment. Yes, sure. Yeah, I mean, this is an issue because people often think that they read online and places like that the solution is to add carpets or a curtain, and it maybe puts a tennis ball under the legs of the chairs to stop them from scraping. These are really great things that you can do, but unfortunately, they really can't change the acoustics of the room that much. And specifically with hearing impairment, the thing that's really building up in the room is low frequency noise, and children with hearing impairment and their ability to really cope with any kind of noise is affected. But specifically having curtains and things like that really just captures high frequency sounds. So it's really you need some proper low frequency acoustic treatment in order to deal with that, and for these children specifically with hearing impairment. Otherwise, they just everything will get lost in the noise.
Yeah, of course.
And also the carpet will add very much for the contact sounds. So it will get the contact sounds down, but it, like Douglas said, it's not specifically for the acoustics in the room.
Yeah, exactly. I remember also when we installed the panels of yours here in the FCL, there was some differences between the carpet and the panels and how much it changes. So it does really make a difference when somebody measures it, actually. And you mentioned in your presentation as well the impacts of COVID, but one of the kind of also issues mentioned in the chat was that now with COVID or the students coming back to school, of course, classroom has to have open windows, open doors, and students run in the hallways. Some of them, Emmanuel, for example, shares that some of them are going for break, some of them are continuing in the classroom. So what is your experience with that? And maybe what are the complaints that you receive most often on this, and how you try to perhaps cater for the situations, or what is your advice on that?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I mean, I think it's too soon to say as well, because, for example, schools have only really just started coming back. So I don't know if there's been too much, at least not in Sweden, but I'm not sure if you've heard something in the Netherlands specifically.
Well, what we do see is that actually the same, like you said. So schools are opening their windows, and I have seen schools where they've taken out the glass from the doors to the hallways to keep the ventilation and some airflow going. Of course, the sound will travel this way, and I think it's more an issue of getting the right ventilation in the schools, in combination then maybe with taking the sounds in consideration, of course, because adding ventilation will add some sound in the classrooms as well. So I think it's more an issue of that.
Yeah, and I guess it's very tricky, especially with this situation, to cater both for the sound and the health, and health being a priority right now. Yeah, it's tricky. And Chad came back on the previous discussion that we had, and he says that he acknowledges that, and he says that they have an old building where their kind of institute are, so they really have issues with how they adapt and how they add, for example, 50 plus dB to ambient room levels. So I think what you mentioned also in the presentation, and I was also curious, you said that of course we're building new schools and we have to cater for the acoustics environments, but what about these older schools? Apart from kind of perhaps specific adding like some panels and stuff, do you think that is it the sound really like improving in these situations, or is it a case that we should tear down all the schools and build new ones?
Well, we've actually recently just redone the acoustics in a school in Sweden in a town called Eslöv, and looking at the measurements that we achieved at that school, we managed to get the acoustics in the classrooms. They were normal 60 square meters typical classrooms. That we managed to get the acoustics in those classrooms down to the level of the standard. So really good, really a lack of echo effects in those rooms, and we did this with just wall panels and ceiling absorbers, and yeah, particularly extra low frequency sound absorption above the ceiling panels.
Yeah, there's a lot of people saying. There's a lot of people that say that unfortunately sound is the last kind of element that governments or whoever is building and designing schools are taking into consideration, and yeah, that noise is perhaps has become like an everyday thing that we have to deal with. So I'm wondering how you mentioned that some countries do have kind of specific policies towards adding this element in the design and the consideration when building schools. Is there kind of you see that a movement that the governments or school administrators kind of hear experts more in the sound and the acoustics more and more, or is it still something that is left for either the last moment or something to cater sometime else?
It's a good question. Would you like to answer, Bianca?
In the Netherlands, we only have guidelines, so we do not, for schools at least, and the guidelines only refer to the reverberation time. But to create a good acoustic environment, we should take more parameters into account. And since it's a guideline, everybody can choose if they want to follow up or not, or maybe they can choose to okay, we now COVID is an item, so okay, we have to focus on fresh air and we leave the acoustics behind. But it's I think it's a combination of everything together. It's a balance. We have to have fresh air in the schools, but also good acoustics and also a very comfortable temperature. It's everything together. And I find it sometimes difficult because we are sending our children to this building every day for 6 to 8 hours. And we have teachers who spend their time there also 6 to 8 hours every day. And if we think about the costs, what is more costly? Creating a good and healthy environment, or having teachers at home feeling sick, having headaches, no energy at the end of the day. So I find this a very difficult discussion, because if I would have to say, then I know the answer, and then I think, okay, we should spend this amount of money to create this healthy environment. And healthy is not only fresh air, but it's, like I said, the combination of things and the balance. So maybe ministry should have a focus on this. Yeah,
definitely. And I feel as if it seems to me as if it's regressing, that the interest in sound and perhaps it was increasing at one point, and a lot of international standards and things have been given rise to as a result of that. And in some places, for example, in Sweden, the building code, it's the legislation actually it refers to the standard and says you have to build it like this if you're doing a refurbishment or if you're doing a new build. But it's now COVID has really taken the wind out of their sails. I think it just really redirected the importance to other environmental factors, such as air quality. So we really need, as a group, as a international group, we need to maintain this awareness and really push for adherence to those standards, or just awareness in general. Teachers need to talk about this stuff. They need to share on forums. They need to complain loudly.
Exactly.
Make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Well, that's also the thing. It's like often is said, when it's not okay, they will complain. But most of the time, they do not even complain. They are used to these buildings. They think it's normal, but it's not. So you're right, Douglas. They should complain about it. And when they complain, this means that they are already working or learning in this building for quite some time, and it's not good for them. It really has an effect on your well-being, being in a good environment and healthy environment or not. So yes, I agree.
Definitely.
Complain.
Yeah. And do you think that perhaps a couple of last questions, because you made these studies, as you mentioned, in schools and stuff, and I guess you have plenty of schools like the before and the after, and what were the main kind of points that the teachers perhaps mentioned to you after the installation or the acoustic kind of improvement of the space that really kind of pop out in your mind?
Well, I can tell from the examples that I've showed. For example, the last one, the sports hall. I've been there very recently. They think it's fantastic, and actually they have found other spaces in the school as well where they think the sound is not optimal and not comfortable. And they've ordered additional panels to create also very nice environments over there. So this effect is, it is what it is. When you feel it, when you experience it, it really makes a difference.
I think often we start off by doing a case study in a school, and we will go in and just do one room or two rooms. And pretty often that will lead to the school requesting the rest of the school be done after that, because the reports and we have tons of testimonials and things, and great feedback from teachers and also students about it.
Exactly. I guess also students see the difference in the teaching and everything. Yeah, and I guess also, what is the issue here then is that the teachers, of course, get the benefit of it when the space is optimized, but they're not the ones taking the decisions. And I'm wondering, other cases that you have kind of show the policymakers, and perhaps how the policymakers or the people that are responsible for maintaining or building schools kind of react to the difference, because of course teachers are there every day and they can totally see the difference. But when you show these examples, the videos, to policymakers or school administrators, how do they take this, and what is your experience of their reactions?
I'll let you take this one, Bianca.
Well, I'm actually not that close involved with policymakers, but I do know that this takes time, and of course, always money is an issue here. So I think it's good, like our international colleagues, that they can take place in these groups. where they have the discussion and raise awareness about this issue. And they can also think together and open up the discussion to see what is possible and what needs to be done.
I think policymakers also really need to not just wait to be told or wait for the teachers to come to them, but they need to look at things like the PISA results from where they've evaluated classrooms and the situation there. And I mean, there's so much information for them to just that they should really seek it out as well to try and create the best environments.
Indeed, there is a lot of research, and of course, it's always a question how much this research is kind of read afterwards. But then I think we have kind of tackled all the questions that our teachers and the participants actually raised, and perhaps the last one, we leave them with a tip or like a thought that you have. If they had to do something, what is your wish, for example, for the students that are for the teachers that are listening to us to think perhaps, or what is a question to put them in their mind next time they go in classroom?
Well, we have a workshop here in the Netherlands, and I always challenge the teachers that are participating in the workshop, like when the next time when you go into your room, just listen and really think about all the sounds that are here, and are they all necessary, and which of the sounds do you need to hear, and which of the sounds are annoying. And you can think about maybe what is possible to change this. Maybe you can think about zoning, put some materials on another place, like maybe there's a machine somewhere that you can move to another room. Just really think about all the sounds that are in the classrooms or in the open spaces and that travel through all the spaces. And what I wish for everybody is that they have this healthy building where they can feel comfortable and teach comfortable and be energetic for the students, where they can concentrate and just enjoy their time in the school. Because, let's be honest, everybody who finished school and is working for some time, they are wishing they would be back. So let's create these environments where they can really enjoy. That's something I wish for everybody. Yeah.
Great.
And you, Douglas?
I would say that it would just be nice if they try and think about the fact that, we have a global world now. Things have really changed over the last, few years. We've really seen a massive influx of children learning in foreign languages, and also, this mainstreaming happening. So if they can really just try and put themselves in the students' shoes and try and understand what they're experiencing, what they need in order to get the best education possible, the kind of sound environment that they would find conducive to learning, and then try and obviously recreate that as well as they can. And if it's not possible for them to recreate it, to fight for a better one. So
yeah, exactly. Well, that was a really, really interesting discussion, and I think a topic that is well, as you said, sometimes not very high on the agenda, but very important for the well-being of everybody, both students and teachers. Thank you both for being with us, and thank everybody that participated and followed us. The recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. Thank you very much, and have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. This is a lovely opportunity. Thank you.